Hello everyone, Jesse Webb, Traders Pro. Market conditions saw a little bit of a bounce here yesterday, still at bearish in a bull market, but we are seeing a little bit of move off of this extreme momentum location, and this is an area where the markets when we see these extremes to the upside and downside, they're just not sustainable at a certain location, and we're at that location here to the downside. We're also seeing breadth at this extreme area and sentiment also in the complacency, which is a bullish sign. So you're seeing bullish to the extreme to the downside. We know that we have this long-term uptrend. We also have breadth, which is oversold. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this trend can't continue to the downside, but not all at once. We get these moves higher and lower. We've got buy-sell ratio, which is extreme this direction. And again, we're up in this location where it just doesn't stay for very long without some kind of a bounce. So, and we're also seeing sentiment now moving back to that extreme here, and with a little bit of a pop back up yesterday, 10.71 versus 9.05, and really extreme right here. I did mention though, if you go back a few years, you can see when we are selling off aggressively, you can get some of these moves that'll really dip down to that a little bit lower than that line, and we're right at that line, but we're sitting right there, and traditionally we get some kind of a pop back up the other direction. I'd be watching for that. We also have looked at S&P 500 through the SPY, bouncing right off that 618 area, and again that area becomes a corrective or a counter trend buy zone inside of that 50% range, and that 618 retracement, that becomes a counter trend buy zone versus a momentum buy zone where the stocks are already up in that area. As they dip back down, but we are still in an overall uptrend, this line is still connecting this direction versus this direction, then we can consider this to be, at least right now, consider this to be the trend and this to be the counter trend. And we got a really nice bottoming tail bar intraday yesterday where we opened, sold off, and then rallied back during the day. So a little bit of constructive bullishness. Obviously, it starts with profit taking, and then we get additional buying, and then potentially, if that buying accelerates, you can get some short covering if short sales were set up, and all of which add to some bullish momentum. So keep an eye on that bounce location. We've got multiple indicators showing that we're oversold and could get a bounce right here. Some ways to be able to trade that. Obviously, you're just through SPY. To buy SPY itself, you could buy in a leveraged ETF. If you look at the muscle ETFs and see if we have anything interesting. Well, first of all, there are a few things in this muscle stock list to keep an eye on. One of those is uranium. We're seeing a massive run up in uranium. The ETF is URNM, and you can see this move. We're towards the upper end of that range now, but that's definitely one to keep in the watch list as it pulls back. We're also seeing oil obviously moving higher, and then we're seeing this inverse ETF, this inverse treasury ETF, moving aggressively here. If we look at the new buys, though, we'll see we've got the SP Oil and Gas Equipment Spider, which is an ETF as well. ETFs are a great way to be able to diversify into different sectors, as you maybe don't want to look for individual stocks, or you want a little bit more diversification across an entire sector. An ETF is a great way to do that. Let's look at some of the new buys. We saw Tidewater have a big pop today, 7%. Oil and energy. Oil had a big run. In fact, let's look at that. If we go here and go to commodities, this oil fund is leading 18% so far this year on USO, and still continuing now, a breakout with a new high. You're seeing oil moving higher. You're seeing oil stocks moving higher in that same breath. Okay, so Tidewater is one of them. If we take a look at go to here, this new buy, and we'll skip through Abercrombie and Fitch. This has been a big uptrend stock all year. Fantastic bullish profile with lots of green in the fundamental areas, and inside of the momentum location still, and finding some support right there. A nice looking stock on AWF, or excuse me, ANF, SMHI. We'll go through some of these. QTRX, possible breakout here. You can see how when they're trending nicely, they just really hold that upper range, that momentum range and that support area, and they bounce and they just continue to move higher off of those levels if they're going to continue. Another oil stock move there. Saw some school stocks moving in the last few days as well. So some interesting stocks to go in and consider for today. That will do it for today's update. Everybody have a fantastic day today.